All right, folks, Jermaine Ferrell in the house with the WFXR Sports Fastlane on WFXRTV.com. And of course, each and every week we have our WFXR Sports Racing Insider, the driver of the car, drive fast, turn left. Unless it's a road course, then it's left and right. Sammy Eanes, what is up, Sammy?
Hey, Jermaine, I'm doing well today. How are you?
I'm doing good. I tell you what, we're going to get this party started because Las Vegas did not disappoint. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but we want racing like that, so maybe we don't want it to stay in Vegas.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, there's so many things I want to ask you about the race overall. But in the end, Alex Bowman, he got it done, beat his teammate, Kyle Larson. But I'm not even going to ask you questions. I want you to unpack it because there's 2 points that I really, it just, something that's unique about it. Yes, Bowman got the W, and that's all it's all about timing, and it's about where you are during the race. But overall, just your overall impressions of it, and then I'll ask you some questions.
Yeah, love the race. Like you said, I hope that racing doesn't stay in Vegas because that was a super exciting race, I thought, especially, which, let's be honest, a lot of times intermediate tracks can get negative feedback from fans in terms of the racing. I thought Sunday's race was outstanding, a lot of fun. I thought Danica Patrick was really good in the booth, from a broadcast perspective. And it was everything you want. You saw different cars up there leading. You had a guy like Ross Chastain, who had an unbelievable day, which we can talk more about that in a minute. But, it looked like Kyle Busch was going to get that W at the hometown track. And then caution comes out with 3 to go. And, man, it's like we talk about a lot. It's sometimes just being in the right place at the right time. Hendrick used the strategy. Alex Bowman gets the W. And that's what it's going to say in the history books forever.
Now, there was obviously, you mentioned strategy. Some of the drivers took 2 tires, some took 4, but even some of the drivers that took 4 tires, they were already used before. Talk about that type of strategy when it comes to the tires, because again, some took 2, which were brand new, but some who took 4 tires were tires that they were already used.
Yeah, look, some people are going to, go by the strategy of, hey, 4 tires. And, obviously they're using this data that they're picking up all throughout the race. They're not just making these decisions on a whim, but oftentimes I think the logic would tell you that 4 tires are going to beat out 2 tires 9 times out of 10, right? And Kyle Busch, I think, made that call, and a lot of other drivers made that call. Their crew chiefs, their teams all made that call. Hendrick, even though they said they didn't coordinate it, all of those teams only took the 2 tires and took the position, which at the end of the day, in a 3-lap shootout, I don't know if it's always the way to go, but it was definitely the way to go on Sunday because you ended up with Larson and Bowman on the front row and then William Byron right up there as well. And, he finished with the top 5 too. So obviously that strategy worked out for the Hendrick cars.
So I guess the question is how often are these tires reused? Because, they did say during the broadcast that Kyle Busch, the 4 tires he replaced, they were used previously in the race. So, I mean, how do you judge? How do they judge how to use the tires in that regard? Because tires do wear out over time, and I was surprised that they used tires that are used in a race.
Yeah, I mean, you only get a certain number of tires you can use in each race, right? Like each team can only use a finite number of tires, and then they're done. So they can't. It's just not like an unlimited supply that they can roll out. And I think, I'm imagining, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I feel like the Busch team probably, they took a pair of tires off that probably was on a short run, and they just went with the new tires because they didn't anticipate burning through all of them, because that is a relatively rare thing. You don't see that too often. So, I'm imagining that they took those tires that only had, the least amount of laps on them and said, okay, these are fresher than the tires we currently have on. They have less laps on them than the tires we currently have on. So let's get those on and let's see if we can make a run with these fresher tires than the ones that are currently on the vehicle.
So I hate to stress this. I know you probably say, why you keep asking questions on the tires, but do they, and again, I don't really know how they do this. Do they, all right, once they take the tires off, do they throw it in a pile of tires we know we will never use? And then do they put a pile of, say, tires that, we probably can get a few more laps out of these if we need them down the road? Is that how kind of they separate once they take the tires off the car?
They typically, you're not going to see them. I don't think you're going to see them use like a tire they used this weekend at, Atlanta in a couple of weeks or something like that. They do keep them on the side. If you are ever in the pits and you notice, I mean, the tire techs are there, with their blow torches. Kind of one of the cooler things to see if you're on pit road. Tire comes off and they're scraping off the rubber that got picked up to see how those tires are wearing. So they keep those for R&D purposes, and then the Goodyear people as well. I mean, Goodyear, obviously they manufacture the tires, not the teams. So all this is always a process. Goodyear wants to produce the best tire for each track and each race. So they're going to collect data from these teams as well to say, hey, let's take this tire back. Let's look at it. Let's see how it wore. If you have a race where tires are maybe wearing out or popping a lot, Goodyear's going to take a look at that and say, okay, we need to go and adjust X, Y, or Z for the next time we come back to this race.
That is fascinating. Just the technology, it comes down, even though we're looking at tires, and tires are so important when it comes to a race. I mean, drivers have lost races because of their tires. And if they don't have good tires, they're going to lose that race.
Yeah. And it's all of this is kind of what makes NASCAR so awesome and unique, right? Like the drivers are the ones out there and the ones who get all the glory, or, usually all of the shame if they lose or something happens. But it really is like so many tentacles on, between the crew chiefs, the crew members doing fast pit stops, the strategy behind, taking 2 tires versus 4, the tires themselves. There are so many facets that can impact a race. That's what, really makes a NASCAR kind of unlike any other sport.
It's kind of like rolling the dice, how appropriately in Vegas when it comes to that. And then another thing, and I had this conversation with one of our pit crew members and Chris at the station. And I'm sure he gave me a little blowback on it. And I said, okay, so if there's a caution that happens, they should freeze the field, which in essence, they do freeze the field. But if you choose to pit, you lose your spot.
Yes.
In my opinion, because that caution happened so far behind the field, it wasn't like it would have impacted the race one way or the other. I feel that whether you pit or not, I feel like, say, for instance, like a Kyle Busch, I feel like even if he gets a chance to pit, he should go back to where he was. But they don't do that. Obviously, you're taking a chance when you pit and when you lose your position. But I feel like on a caution that you should go back to where you were, because the caution really would not have impacted you. I mean, he was well on his way to winning that race had that caution not appeared. Just your thoughts on it, or am I way off base on this?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. If that caution hadn't happened, Kyle Busch was going to win that race, right? Like that was certainly going to happen. But I think that's just part of the essence of NASCAR, and quite honestly, like just the way it's been. You are taking the risk of saying, I'm going to go in and pit and give up this position because I think tires are going to benefit me more, or I need the splash of gas, or whatever the case may be. And I think if you freeze that field and allow somebody to come in and pit, you're not, the pit crew isn't as under pressure to perform a good pit stop. And, look, go back to the championship race last year, right? Like Kyle Larson's team turning their fastest pit stop of the year at the moment they needed the most impacted that race and gave Kyle Larson the championship. So if you freeze the field, that doesn't necessarily matter, right? You don't have to say, all right, I have to go in here and perform as a pit crew, as the crew chief, getting that pit crew ready to go out and execute what they do. And quite frankly, a lot of them get paid a lot of money to do, it kind of negates that a little bit. So I think keeping it, the way it is, and I don't think you keep things the way they are just because they've always been that way, but I think it definitely plays into the strategy and honestly, the I don't want to say usefulness, but it plays into the pit crew and their importance, especially in, those waning moment pit stops like we saw in Phoenix last year and like we saw in Vegas this past Sunday.
Yeah, I just think it's unique, and it's a shame because, like I said, I mean, it just, when that caution, boy, when it comes up, it could really do damage. And, who's to say? Well, in my opinion, let me ask you this, just from your perspective, do you feel that Kyle Busch had to pit? Do you think he could have probably won it still in overtime, or do you feel like he really had to pit?
That's a great question. I mean, it's such a short run. You almost think like, okay, I could stay out there. But, in his head, he's thinking, okay, my competitors are going in, they're getting fresh tires. Maybe they're getting 4, maybe they're getting 2, whatever. So you're always thinking like, okay, am I a sitting duck if I stay out here and others do not? Now on a short run, when you're talking 3 laps, I don't know that it makes that much of a difference, depending on the track, obviously. But then it's like, okay, well, if we go into another overtime, if there's a caution that comes out before the white flag and we have to do another couple laps, then you're really, hurting yourself. But again, that's kind of the strategy element of trying to figure out, okay, what's going to be the best way to set us up for success to try to win this race.
It's almost like it's a coin flick. It's one of those things where you're darned if you do and you're darned if you don't. So it's just hard to say. Yeah, I feel bad for him. But anyway, I mean, looking at Hendrick winning back-to-back races, just your overall thought in that regard, because it was I was going to be Bowman or Larson, and Bowman's move during the overtime to overtake Larson was an awesome move. I mean, he had to make that move.
It was absolutely. I thought, like probably everyone watching at home thought after those pit stops, okay, here we go. The Kyle Larson again, right? Like we end up in the situation and the five's going to end up back in victory lane. And, I know Kyle Busch called Alex Bowman's win a word that I don't think I can use on the fast lane. But at the end of the day, like Bowman got up there, got himself in a position, and to your point, made a great move on, quite frankly, the best driver in NASCAR right now. And he won the race, and I think that is a testament to him and his ability. I think I forgot the exact quote that Busch used because he referenced that that Bowman's kind of had this happen a couple of times, right? Where it looks like someone else has a race in a bag, a caution comes out, and Bowman just kind of slides his way in. But at the end of the day, you still have to go out and execute and perform. And he did a fantastic move to get past his teammate Kyle Larson to get the win. The other thing I'll point out is Kyle Busch, who was one of the great drivers of all time, make no mistake about it. But since he won his title in 2019, he has 3 Cup Series victories. Alex Bowman has 6. So BS or not, he has double the victories that Kyle Busch has over the last couple of years. So, he's doing something right. And like I said earlier, that's what the record book's going to reflect from here into eternity, that Alex Bowman has 6 wins, whether it's a quote unquote fluke or not over the past few years. And I don't think you fluke your way into winning 6 races over a couple year span.
And then one other thing you mentioned Chastain had a great run. I believe he led the most laps in the race. I mean, if you're him, and really, I just feel like it just seems like these next gen cars, it seems like they're really leveling the playing field. I mean, Ross Chastain with a great run. So just your overall thoughts. Now we're 3 races in. I'll probably ask you this question every week, but now that we're in it, I just feel like there's just so much balance. And then I got another question for you, but yeah, just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it certainly seems to be balanced. We're still only a couple races in, so want to get a few more under the belt. But I mean, the next gen car early on seems to be producing the results that NASCAR intended for it to do, right? Chastain, like you said, led 89 laps, won a stage for the first time in Trackhouse racing history. I'm a big Ross Chastain fan. I think not only as a driver, I think he's an excellent driver, and I think he will win races for Trackhouse. But I think he has a relatability that can connect with fans if he gets up there and starts competing and winning races, where I think he could be a big star for the sport. So I'm pulling for Ross Chastain. I'd love to see him win. And it was great to see him run Tyler Reddick last week. You've seen drivers that you don't typically see up here winning stages and competing. Daytona is a little bit of a wild card, so you throw that out a little bit. But Fontana, now Vegas, and I hope it continues. I want to see Reddick. I want to see Daniel Suarez, who had a great run at Fontana, Austin Dillon, all of these drivers who aren't necessarily at Gibbs, Hendrick, or Penske, running, competing, and hopefully winning races this year.
And you mentioned Gibbs, and one of Gibbs' top drivers, Denny Hamlin. He's pretty much started off the season a little sluggish, and he had issues also in Vegas. Just break down Denny Hamlin and what you're seeing from him that we really aren't used to seeing.
Yeah, you're exactly right. This is an abnormal start to the year for Denny Hamlin and the 11 crew. It's still early, so I don't know that it's worth throwing up huge red flags just yet, but he's definitely been, first DNF he's ever had at Daytona. Bad luck at Vegas. He's had a little bit of rough go with 2 of the 3 races so far. So, but Phoenix is actually a really good track for him, which I know we'll talk about in a little bit. So I have a feeling we may see him turn the corner this week at Phoenix, and then kind of get back on the right track of what we expect to see, and we have seen from Hamlin the last 2 or 3 years, especially.
Speaking of Phoenix, you brought it up. You said a little bit. Let's talk about it right now. The Valley of the Sun, Sammy, they're going to be racing in Phoenix. Of course, the name of the race is the Ruoff Mortgage 500. I love these sponsorship names. Of course, It'll happen Sunday, March the 13th. It'll be a 3:30 start. Now, what's cool is the purse is nearly $7 million, which what Sammy Eanes makes every week when he does his thing.
Ooh,
It starts
wish.
of course, coverage begins on WFXR at 3 o'clock, and the race will start at 3:30. Now it's a 312 laps, and there's three stages. Stage one ends in lap 60. Stage two ends at lap 185, and the final stage ends at lap 312. And of course, last year's winner of the race was Martin Truex Jr. And looking at the stats overall, when you look at this race, the driver that has the most wins at this track is Kevin Harvick. He has 9. His most recent win was 2018. He has had a pair of sweeps. He swept in 2014 and 2006. And then after that, Kyle Busch has got 3 wins there. His most recent was 2019. Joey Logano, he's got a pair of wins. His last in 2020. And then, of course, Denny Hamlin, he has a pair of wins there in 2019. So, again, these drivers will have an opportunity to practice and qualify on Saturday. And so just looking at the track overall, I mean, your overall thoughts about Phoenix and just breaking down the race as a whole.
Yeah, fantastic track. One of my favorites to watch is Phoenix. Great opportunity if you ever get the chance to go out there. It's an awesome track to visit as well. And it almost always produces good racing. So I'm really excited to see this car on the Phoenix Raceway track and seeing how it holds up. And again, hopefully it produces results like we saw last week at Vegas. And, you know, when I look at the drivers at Vegas, really, especially for the last 3 years, it's really been kind of one of the more spread out tracks. Harvick has the great history there. Kyle Busch does too. But over the last 3 years specifically, you've got Hamlin with a win, you've got Logano with a win, you've got Larson obviously with the win last year. So I think with the variance we saw with the drivers throughout the field the last 2 weeks, plus that taken into account, I'm hoping we see a lot of movement throughout the field, a lot of green flag passes, and we see an exciting race in Phoenix this weekend. I think it will be a good one, and it will carry over what we saw in Vegas last weekend.
So, you know, I got to ask you this each and every week. Give me your winner and your dark horse.
Yeah, we talked about Hamlin a minute ago, and yeah, he's had a rough start to the season, but he's got top fives in his last 5 starts at Phoenix. He's got a win. Joey Logano, I've picked him twice this year, and he hasn't brought me much luck. He's got 4 top 10s in his last 5 starts at Phoenix, and that 5th, he finished 11th. So he runs really well there. He's got the win. But, man, I have to go back to Kyle Larson. I know it's probably saying this is an easy one, but Larson he's again showing that he is the best driver currently in NASCAR. All the wins last year, the win at Fontana, the performance last week to get himself in that situation and almost win that race. I have to pick the 5 in Phoenix, and who knows, I may end up picking him every week until other drivers start proving me wrong and winning races more often than Kyle Larson wins them. Okay,
and then your dark horse.
Dark horse, you mentioned Kevin Harvick, and if you look at the Vegas odds, I think he's 17-1 when I checked this morning. 9-time winner there at Phoenix, so he's definitely someone that I would keep my eye on as an underdog, if you can think of Kevin Harvick as an underdog, because he does have the 9 career wins there. As you mentioned, he hasn't won since 18, but, you know, man, before that, when you went to Phoenix, you knew that was Kevin Harvick territory. So keep an eye on him. Another one I'd say to keep an eye on is Christopher Bell. He's in the same kind of range. I think he was 18-19-1, something like that. 2 top 10 finishes there last year in his first year for JGR. So Christopher Bell could be an interesting dark horse to keep your eye on this Sunday also.
Dumb question for you. Why was Kyle Larson so – I'm not Kyle Larson. I'm sorry, Kevin Harvick. Why was he so good at Phoenix from your perspective?
You know, certain – drivers just have a feel for certain tracks, right? Like Jeff Gordon at Martinsville, I feel like is like that, where a guy knows just the right marks to hit, the corners, understands like what it takes to drive it. Then Denny Hamlin on super speedways for that matter. You look at him and, you know, it just seems like he understands the aerodynamics at that track, you know, where to hit his marks. You just kind of get in a groove and understand. And again, I think it's something that makes NASCAR super unique is you go to these different tracks and certain drivers know how to run well. Quite honestly, Chastain at Vegas is kind of like that. He has Xfinity Series wins at Las Vegas. So maybe there's something with the track there that he just understands, you know, how to maneuver a car around there. And I think that's just what you saw with Kevin Harvick at Phoenix for all those years when he had the 9 wins is he just liked that track. There was something about the conditions there, and he knew how to get the car around there better than anyone else.
Now, I got to ask you this question. Obviously, this is wraps up the West Coast swing. For people who probably don't understand or know, I mean, obviously, everybody's shops are in Charlotte.
Mhm.
So when you have three races out on the West Coast, how do drivers, how do crews, how do they navigate that, basically?
A lot, and it's different by team and by driver. A lot of the drivers honestly just camp out on the West Coast for those 3 weeks. You know, they say I'm going to set up shop in LA or Vegas or Phoenix or somewhere in between, and that way they don't have to bounce back and forth. And a lot of crew members, some of them do the same. You know, some crew members honestly have day jobs and have to come back to Charlotte for things. It's really a case by case situation, but you do see a lot of personnel stay out on the West Coast for these 3 races. And honestly, I don't know for sure this was a decision, but I think part of this, when they initiated this to have the West Coast swing, or NASCAR goes west, was honestly probably a cost saving initiative for teams, for the broadcast partner. You know, Fox and NBC have to move these giant compounds from track to track to set up the broadcast. So only having to go from, you know, Fontana to Vegas to Phoenix is a little bit easier than going Phoenix to Homestead, back to Fontana, another point. I know they go back west again. You have Sonoma, you have second Vegas, second Phoenix. You know, so there are other West Coast races, but I think keeping these 3 together, and honestly, it makes it for a unique opportunity for fans if you're able to take a 3-week road trip or even a 2-week road trip and say, hey, I'm going to hit 2 tracks in close proximity. It's really one of the only other times you get from that outside of, you know, Richmond, Martinsville, and when those races are concurrent weekends and, you know, very close driving distances. So yeah, it's really a case by case basis, but there are definitely personnel, especially hauler drivers who are transporting the cars, people like that, that are making a West Coast to East Coast and back trip for their week. So it is definitely taxing and a lot of hard work for some people that are going back and forth from Charlotte to the West Coast during this West Coast swing.
And real quick, I'll run through some of the races that are coming up. In fact, I'll go through the next few. You know, after Phoenix, we go to Atlanta for the Fold of Honor Quick Trips 500. That'll be March the 20th, 3 o'clock. You can see that race right here on WFXR. Then on March the 27th, the Circuit of Americas. So they're going to get a little road course action down in Austin. And then on April the 3rd, we go to Richmond for a Sunday afternoon race. And then, of course, the one we're all really, I mean, we all look forward to all of them, but really the big one, the night race, Saturday night in Martinsville. And that'll be a 7:30, again, 400 laps. It's a shorter race than the 5 they usually have. And then the dirt race in Bristol coming up on April the 17th. And then on April the 24th, they go down to Talladega for the Geico 500. So those are your next 7 races. So, we don't want to get too ahead of, but just your thoughts about that. Particularly, you mentioned something about taking 3 weeks off. So in theory, Sammy, you could do a Richmond, Martinsville, Bristol run because that's where it's going to be. Well, the
Yeah,
Commonwealth, in
absolutely.
essence, will be in the spotlight when it comes to racing coming up in April.
Yeah, there's a lot. You know, I know we don't have the changes and the new tracks on this year's schedule we had on last year's, but I love this little stretch here. You've got new Atlanta, for lack of a better term. So very curious to see how that race pans out. Circuit of the Americas, just the second time we've gone back there. Hopefully there's some better weather. You know, last year the conditions were really rough out there. So hoping they can get a good weekend in Austin and see how the cars perform out there on a true road course. I know Chase Elliott is probably looking forward to seeing a road course on the schedule. And then, Richmond, great track. Obviously, I have a soft spot for Martinsville. Under Light's going to be awesome. You've got Dale Jr. racing the Xfinity race on Friday night in Martinsville, which is going to be cool to see him back behind the wheel of a car. And then Bristol Dirt round 2. You know, what did NASCAR learn? What did the teams learn? What did Bristol learn from running that race last year? Will they make, changes? I know there was a lot of discussion last year about the dust and things coming up and maybe, trying to change how they treat the dirt or the dirt they bring in for that race to cover the track. So very curious to see that race and how it turns out as well. These next few weeks are going to be a lot of fun on the NASCAR calendar.
It definitely will be. And we're definitely excited about it, and I'm excited about it. And obviously, I'm really, again, I'm looking forward to Martinsville's 75th anniversary of their race coming up. 75 years, the only track to have it all in the existence of NASCAR. So, we call it the Wrigley Field, and I think it is. It's the Wrigley Field. And it's neat how that track has grown over the years. And of course, we'll get more into it as we get closer to it. So, Sammy, we're dropping the checkered flag, sir. Again, we had March Madness. Again, I know you're a Virginia Tech fan. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it up. March Maddox doing his thing in the Big Apple.
Huge shot last night. It was definitely the highest of highs and the lowest of lows in my household. I mentioned before, my much better half is a Clemson alum. So, a little bit of a dagger for her, but I was excited to see the Hokies win. Maddox, man, ice water, hadn't played a second in that OT and comes off the bench and drills that three with complete and total calmness and confidence. It was beautiful to see. Obviously, I'm hoping the Hokies can do it again against Notre Dame today and maybe squeeze their way into the big dance. We'll see.
Yeah, and then the strategy too, because he took Coach Young, popping like Wolver Redenbacher. I mean, to take Keve Aluma out and put in Maddox, that was either they would look at it as a brilliant move or a not so brilliant move, and it was brilliant. Because this guy, he did it against Miami, a couple weeks ago. So hey, do it now. So big time stuff.
Absolutely. I would be lying if I said I didn't when they were like, Kevin Aluma's coming out of the game. Like, we're going all guard lineup. Like, because in my head, I was thinking you don't need a 3. You can go get a 2 and force us to another overtime. But Mike Young and Darius Maddox called game. And honestly, I'm okay with that.
That's good. I love that. Everything was out there. Said called game. So good stuff. Well, I tell you what, you the man, 100 grand. So congratulations. And again, we appreciate you each and every week on the WFXR Sports Fastlane, WFXR2.com. Sammy, you are the best. And your NASCAR knowledge is second to none. And I really appreciate you giving me time each and every week, because I feel like every week, and I'm not kidding when I say this, I sincerely mean this and I sincerely say this. Whenever I speak to you about NASCAR, I learn something new each and every time.
I appreciate it very much. It's always awesome to come on here, chop it up with you, to talk NASCAR, talk other things that may come up. You're the best. Appreciate it very much, and always happy to join you here in the Fast Lane.
Good deal. So until next week, thank you so much, Sammy. You're the man. And until next week, we're dropping the checkered flag on the WFXR Sports Fast Lane. I'm Jermaine Ferrell. Hope all of your teams are winners. Have a wonderful and blessed week and day and weekend, everyone. And go racing!